Rumor has it that Jesus is alive. Reports of an empty tomb, they came first. Whispers of resurrection came next. Others said that Jesus was seen, that he's here in Jerusalem. Mary Magdalene says she saw him, talked with him. The other disciples say they saw him too, saw his scars. But I wasn't there. I wasn't at the tomb with Mary. And I wasn't in the room with those others. I haven't seen Jesus, not since what I last saw. It's in my mind and it plays like a loop. What I did see keeps interrupting my thoughts, keeps flashing in front of me, no matter what is actually there. I saw Jesus arrested. Just seconds before, we were laughing and we were eating and talking, and then it all went wrong. I saw Jesus kiss him, and everything changed. Temple authorities, they grabbed him, they took him away, and the next thing I saw was Jesus carrying that cross to Golgotha, and I saw him nailed to it. I looked on until it was too much. I couldn't look anymore. I couldn't listen to the taunts or the wailing or the cries. It was too much. And so I had to leave. Most of us did. And since then, I've been wandering around Jerusalem, trying to figure out what to do next. How can I be? Where do I go? And what I do see right in front of me is Rome everywhere. Guards are stationed not only where Jesus was buried, but out and visible on our streets. So I keep my head down. I try to stay out of their notice. I don't want to be seen by them. But I don't want to hide either. I don't want to concede completely, to let them forget the movement or Jesus or all of us who followed him. I don't want them to think that they won. So I wasn't with the other disciples. They're too scared to come out of that room to be even alone. But somehow that seems like another betrayal of Jesus, at least to me. So I can't contemplate these rumors of a risen Christ when all I see everywhere is evidence of his death, and I feel the weight of grief within me. A little wondering and wandering with our friend Thomas. I think it can be a helpful practice. He's got such a bad rap, this doubting Thomas. But a close reading doesn't convince me that doubt is what Thomas is struggling through at all. It seems that he's suffering with trauma, not trust issues. This isn't some timid, prevaricating person unsure of his devotion to Jesus. After all, from John's gospel, just a few chapters before this, it was Thomas who rallied the disciples to follow Jesus to Bethany. Others doubted the good sense of this journey, and certainly their safety, since it was in Bethany that Jesus had only narrowly escaped being stoned to death. Thomas addresses them in that moment, zeroing in on their fear, their worry, saying, "Let us go, that we may die with him." This Thomas is fully invested in living out his faith in God, his discipleship to Jesus. He's courageous. He's present. He's engaged in the full spectrum of his experience as a follower of Christ, the good and the bad and the ugly and the unknown. So true to form, when we find him just days after Jesus' death, he's at the apex of grief, still shook. It's totally understandable. having just experienced all that he had, to not accept the rumors of resurrection, the stories of something else happening to Jesus that he hadn't seen, when he had seen so much. It's totally understandable that he would need to and want to witness for himself if and how Jesus lives again. It's totally understandable that he would need to be near Jesus, to touch him, to grab on and to feel the scars that Thomas last saw as open wounds. But where tradition might miss the point, Jesus understands Thomas. So when Jesus appears before him and the other disciples, Jesus invites Thomas to face him, to reach out, to feel for himself the truth of resurrection. Facing fear and witnessing transformation is part of embracing this new life. And it can take some time to get our heads around it, right? It can take a personal encounter to get our heart around it. Now, Jesus knows that it can take a lot when living with death and despair so close to be assured that Christ is risen, and more than that, to believe that we can be risen too. I don't know about you, but to me, this story helps. It helps a lot. Because right here in this series of first encounters with the resurrected one, John wants to make sure. He wants to make sure that we know that embracing this new life and integrating the reality of resurrection into our lives, well, it isn't uncomplicated. It gives me solace. It gives me hope even that part of the renewing of our faith and an important piece of what makes this resurrection real for each of us is facing the obstacles in its way, feeling out the other places where healing is happening, but wholeness is not yet achieved. The forces that create those open vulnerabilities, they lessen in magnitude when we do face them. They diminish, even with a simple touch, when held in our hearts next to the alternative and transforming power that we can find in Christ Jesus. Today, I can't help but think of the Tennessee Three. We are, it seems to me, witnessing real resurrection there. New life is breaking forth, a renewed sense of collective power and potential change. And this is coming from a people who too recently have borne witness to the violent and senseless, avoidable deaths of their own, of kids, of adults, of their friends, all innocents. And when those deaths were met with silence and with inaction from their electeds, those kids and parents and teachers and three very, very visible representatives took to the streets and they went to the people's house, demanding that the truth be faced, demanding that change could happen, demanding that the gun lobby matter less to them than kids do, than human lives do. And friends, remember, this is only days after those deaths. Wounds are still open. Grief hasn't even begun. And those witnesses turned activists, walked strong and tall and proud and resilient. But please, let's not us forget that they are walking in the shadow of the tomb. So what I keep thinking about is this enormous effort invested. A huge amount of intentional and focused energy was galvanized by those in power. And it was not used to listen to the vast majority of the people. It was not used to attack the source problem or not to cry out and lament in solidarity with all that had lost. No, it was used to silence this movement that these Tennessee folks have made visible, to expel the prophets this effort was intending to do, even though they lifted their voices to the powers that be. It was to deny the truth about gun violence here. And all of that effort, all of this time and calculation and the energy put into this effort, it backfired. So those actions taken to kill that movement ended up giving it global attention. They put a direct spotlight on the gaping wounds that our country still carries, inflicted by its idolatry of guns and our placating of the gun lobby. Now, I started gathering data on Monday for this sermon, and that morning I noted that the most up-to-date statistic held that this country, at that moment, had experienced 141 mass shootings in just this year. But friends, by that day's end, just 4 hours after I typed that note into my computer, the number was up to 143. We've experienced more mass shootings than days this year. This horrific reality, though, it was not ignored, not avoided by the people of Tennessee. The newly lost lives, they weren't forgotten and moved on from. Thousands faced the truth, touched the rupture in our country and culture, and they knew it for what it was. And they started shouting about it, raising consciousness, raising voices, raising hell. Representative Justin Pearson, a few minutes before being expelled alongside Representative Justin Jones, preached, I hope you heard it, preached to the crowd in the formal body. It is something that in that moment, witnessing what was another death blow to democracy, he spoke about what? Resurrection. He said this: resurrection is a promise and it is a prophecy. It's a prophecy that came out of the cotton fields. It's a prophecy that came out of the lynching tree. It's a prophecy that still lives in each and every one of us in order to make Tennessee the place it ought to be. So I got hope, he said, because I know we are still here and we will never quit. I can't help but think about Thomas when I think about the people and the effort in Tennessee. People that are navigating the edges of crucifixion while at the very same time making real the resurrection for others and for themselves. That is powerful stuff. That is real faith that's being lived in, being renewed. It's astounding, really, to consider how even we can be experiencing the unfolding of trauma, how we can feel the very real and persistent press of empire, and at the same time, how even we can point towards and bear witness to the promise and the presence of a risen Christ. That is Easter, my friends. That is Easter. It brings to mind the words of James Baldwin, some of which were quoted by our Carla Michael at the Easter sunrise service. In a 1962 Times article, Baldwin addressed the role of the writer, the artist in society. He believed that society depends on the artist to push and prod and point to difficult truth. Because otherwise, with great ease, that truth could be kept functioning and remain unwitnessed. But there was another reason that he believed confronting ills and obstacles to new life was necessary. And he wrote this: "We are the generation that must throw everything into the endeavor to remake America into what we want it to be. Morality must be perpetually examined and cracked, changed and made new. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Thomas knew that. And with courage and with curiosity, with resilience and with faith, he encountered the living Christ. He stepped towards life. He looked for signs of healing. He reached out for relationship. And because he did so with all of himself, with all of his experience, with death even being so near, because he did so, he witnessed resurrection. Because he could testify to the truth of life's triumph over death, we can have faith, even with sight unseen. That way of living holy, of bringing your faith to bear on all the whole expanse of human experience, it's what I aspire to do. It's what we aspire to do as those who follow Jesus, right? Maybe with Thomas in mind, our understanding of what it means to experience resurrection is a little broader, a little wider, a little less restrictive, and more real. And maybe with Thomas in mind, our understanding of faith looks a little more human and a whole lot more holy. From Mary Magdalene, from Thomas, and from the other disciples, we learn to encounter the risen Christ. We don't have to be over our fear. To encounter the risen Christ, we don't have to be free of doubt or fear or confusion or questions. To encounter the risen Christ, we don't need to know what the heck is going to happen next. We just have to step towards signs of life and love that are all around us, even right in front of us. And from Jesus, we are taught that resurrection, friends, doesn't depend on the eradication of evil. Resurrection doesn't depend on the perfection of participants. Thank God. Resurrection doesn't depend on trauma being resolved or wounds being healed. Resurrection doesn't wait for oppressors to be ousted or for change to be welcomed even. Resurrection is right here. Reach for it. Touch it. And please join it.